Welcome to Ideas Sunday. It's February 10th, 2019. It's hard enough to buy a house. Harder still when college loans are consuming nearly all of your discretionary income.
It interests me because unfortunately I'm 33 and I still have student loans.
But one area suburb has a plan that could help. A series of letters written to a man who once literally owned their ancestors revealed to some modern-day Americans their family history from 185 years ago.
This is our history. This is American history. I will now bring my letter to a close, hoping soon to hear from you again.
Could the Banshees of Avatar, the phasers of Star Trek, or the attack of the giant leeches have some basis in reality?
Oh, I think science fiction is great for science. It's an easy way to kind of think about scientific things.
We'll look at how science fiction sometimes bends the truth for entertainment value, but teaches us as well. Ideas Sunday is next.
Brought to you by Westfield, offering insurance to protect what's yours, grow your business, and achieve your dreams.
Good morning and welcome to Ideas Sunday. I'm Rick Jackson. Thanks for joining us. More than 40,000 people a year seek some form of support from the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. Many of those survivors initially reach out through the center's 24-hour crisis and support hotline. This month marks 45 years since the hotline answered its first call. Since then, the center's expanded to serve 4 Northeast Ohio counties and has added to the ways survivors can access support services, including text to the hotline and online chat. Sandra Miller, president and CEO of Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, shared with me some of the lessons learned over the past 4.5 decades, including what's changed and what remains the same, and the ongoing fight to change our culture to prevent sexual violence from happening in the first place.
So 45 years ago, there were a group of people in the community who recognized that survivors of rape and sexual abuse had literally nowhere to call, nowhere to go for help. And it was a community organizing effort. They hosted a meeting, tried to recruit some volunteers, and started a 24-hour hotline that was open a few days a week for a certain number of hours. Over time, they were able to secure some grant funding from the Cleveland Foundation and Gun Foundation and bring the hotline up to 24/7. Now fast forward 45 years, we've now answered over 125,000 calls on that rape crisis and support hotline here in Cleveland.
I would imagine for a lot of women, that's the first contact they have with your agency.
Oftentimes, some people say, I don't even really know if what happened to me is rape. I don't really know what happened to me. I just know this is how I feel. This is kind of how I woke up. This is what I remember. And it's sort of an entry point into questions about, well, are you interested in filing a police report? Are you interested in talking with a counselor? Who have you told? Do you need some help talking to your parents or your partner or anyone else in your family about what you're going through?
I guess now we could say we are much more awake when it comes to sexual assault as a society. We recognize things that we didn't recognize 45, 35, 25 years ago.
Yeah, this was very much something that was off the radar. It swept under the rug. It's so uncomfortable and so hard for people to talk about that it makes it really difficult for survivors, men, women, children, anyone to come forward and say, this is what's happened to me. I think we've seen over 4.5 decades that, some of the stigma about sexual violence has dissipated, but for the survivors who are coming forward today, they still very much feel that this sort of shrouded in secrecy is kind of how we describe it.
We talk about what they've learned over the years as a society. What have you learned as an agency to help these survivors?
Sometimes I've said to the team as we're celebrating our anniversary, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And what I mean by that is sexual violence is a very complex issue. We've learned a lot, law enforcement has learned a lot, medical community's learned a lot, but it still comes down to one very simple principle, that stopping sexual violence starts with listening to and believing survivors when they come forward. And even in some of the very high-profile cases that we've seen in recent years, the USA Gymnastics Larry Nassar Michigan State case is one. It took dozens of people survivors to come forward before the community was willing to believe that what they had to say was true.
Yeah, listening, you say, is that first and most important step. But how do we prevent these things from happening so that we don't have to listen to survivors because we don't have that many?
And again, I believe preventing starts with listening to survivors and understanding how often this happens. 1 in 5 women in Ohio will be raped in their lifetime, 1 in 71 men at least. I think that's a pretty conservative estimate. It's happening at just an unbelievable rate, and yet we try to pretend like it only happens, a little bit here in the dark alley here. It's hard for us as a society to understand that this happens to people that we know and love and trust, and they may not have shared their story with us because of all the reasons why someone might not come forward. But sexual violence is something that impacts not just survivors, but also their families and friends and the community.
Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about this many times in the past on this program. Certainly one of the high points was when the Me Too movement started. Are you still seeing a high number of calls? Really, has that been a linchpin, a turning point?
We definitely, in late 2017 and into 2018, saw a big spike in calls. And when there's a high profile case in the news, it's pretty common for us to see an increase. But steadily over the past 45 years, the number of calls to our hotline has gone up just a little bit every year. Last year, we helped over 6,900 people in our crisis hotline. But for those who are still coming forward today, I will say even post Me Too movement, the barriers to getting someone through our criminal justice system in a way that restores their sense of justice and gives them some sense of healing, it's a very difficult journey and something that no one should have to do alone.
Really, it's a lifetime journey.
That's right. Our survivors report to us that you don't wake up one day and, oh, justice has been served or I am now healed. That recovering from a sexual assault is a lifelong journey, and you learn how to cope with it. It's not something you can just forget about or tuck away or move on. You just learn how to keep moving forward.
Is that something you're trying to teach people to get through, to help them in some fashion with it? Have you guys learned how to help better?
Yeah, it's very much our philosophy. When someone calls the hotline or they may come into one of our offices for counseling, and it's their choice if they even want to talk to us about what happened to them, what their experience was. But what we really want to focus on is is this past trauma, how's it impacting you today, and how can we give you some coping skills, how can we teach you some techniques to sort of minimize the impact so you can keep on living a productive and thriving and healthy life.
You mentioned that 6,900 number, I think that's what you said?
Yeah.
It's got to be enlightening that many people are coming forward, but discouraging that many people are coming forward.
Yes, we know the prevalence of sexual violence, we know how many people are impacted, and we know only a very small fraction are ever coming forward and reporting to formal authorities. So we see when contacts to our hotline go up, we see that as a positive. It doesn't mean it's happening more, it means more people feel comfortable talking about what's happening and asking for help.
You have a fundraiser coming up, keynote speaker being a woman who told her story on the Oprah Winfrey Show lately. Does that help when people see someone who's willing to come forward nationally? It helps them to come forward locally?
I think every survivor has their own story, but sometimes you do find inspiration or courage in seeing that other people have gone through difficult times and they've come out not just okay, but really in a place where they are healthy, safe, and thriving. So we do think Rena Romano, our keynote speaker, is going to bring some inspiration to survivors, but also to people in our community who are supporters of survivors and who are active bystanders in preventing violence from happening in the first place.
Got part of your mission statement here, the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, work to end the silence surrounding sexual violence and the stigma found within our community. Expand on that for us. You mentioned silence before, but stigma is still out there.
Yeah, we hear from survivors regularly who they say, my case is, when I Google my name, my case comes up and it's the first thing people learn about me. Is this going to prevent me, if people know I'm a survivor, is it going to prevent me from getting a job or applying to this school? And we want to get to a place where our society understands that survivor did absolutely nothing wrong. Somebody committed a crime against them, and there's nothing about it being a survivor that needs to be shameful. It was somebody else's choice to harm you, and that's something we talk about with survivors one-on-one in services, and then something when we do community education and youth prevention programs, it's also something that we're talking about.
45 years behind you, you hope that we don't need this in 45 years, but we have to plan as if we do. What's in the future?
So Cleveland Rape Crisis Center is pretty excited. We received some funding from the Ohio Attorney General's office, and we're planning to open 2 new offices in 2019. We provide services now in 4 counties in Northeast Ohio: Lake, Geauga, Ashtabula, and Cuyahoga. And we're on track to reach almost 70,000 people this year through our education and direct services to survivors.
Each February, the nation recognizes and honors contributions and sacrifices made by African Americans throughout our history. Many of their stories are lost to time because until slavery was abolished in 1865, few blacks had an opportunity to become literate. But a Cleveland family gained rare insight into the lives of their ancestors because 2 of those relatives who did learn to read and write chronicled their lives as slaves. For Carol Malone, it's a way to know her family's past through letters that Peyton and Lucy Skipwith wrote to their master. In this story, we first reported back in 2017. IdeaStream's Darielle Snipes shares those letters, written by 2 generations of the Skipwith family.
Dear Master, I received your letter a few days ago, dated October 14th, it being nearly 2 months on the way.
Carol Malone is reading a part of her family's past.
And I'm still carrying on my school on the plantation, and the children are learning very fast. I have been thinking of putting up a large school next year, as I can do more at that than I can anything else. And I can get more children than I can teach. But I do not know yet whether I will be at liberty to do so or not.
These words, written by Carol's great-great-great-grandmother, Lucy Skipwith, written more than 150 years ago. Lucy is writing to her master, John Hartwell Cock.
I was truly glad to see that you were still alive and not yet gone the way of all the earth, and that you were able to write me once more.
In the letter, Lucy shows concern for her master's well-being and is not afraid to hide her skill from him because he is the one who encouraged her to learn how to read and write.
It was illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write. So Cock was actually violating the law in doing this, even though it was his interest to do it, because he wanted information. He wanted these relationships. He thought that this experiment, if it worked, might solve, quote, a great problem.
Lucy was born a slave on the Bremo plantation in Virginia, which was owned by Cock sometime in the late 1830s. Carol says when Lucy was around 5 years old, her family and about 40 other slaves walked for weeks from Virginia to Greensboro, Alabama, to set up another plantation for Cock, one he conceived as an experiment to end slavery.
So he set up an experiment to teach his enslaved people to read and write and become good church people as one step toward their freedom and then their removal to Africa, to Liberia.
Cock also sent Peyton Skipwith, Lucy's uncle, to Liberia as a part of the American Colonization Society's movement to return free slaves to Africa. And Peyton wrote letters back to Cock as well.
Dear sir, I embrace this opportunity to inform you that we were all in moderate health at this time, hoping that these few lines may find you and yours enjoying good health. After 56 days in the ocean, we all landed safe on New Year's Day.
Randall Miller is a professor of history at St. Joseph University in Philadelphia. He's reading one of the letters Peyton wrote when he first arrived to Liberia.
You mentioned in your letter that you would like to know the prices of stonemasons per day, carpenters, etc. The wages of stonemason can get when work is to be had about $1.50 per day, carpenter from 75 cents to $1 to $1.25.
This was the only way Cock could stay in contact and know what was happening on his plantation in Alabama and in Liberia. In his book, Dear Master, Letters of a Slave Family, published almost 40 years ago, Miller edited a collection of the letters.
There was nothing like it anywhere in the United States, and I had to sit down and try to discover such people, understand them, and then I hope be able to write about them in a fair and intelligent way.
Carol, whose parents moved from Alabama to Cleveland in 1941, discovered Miller's book years after it was published. She was astonished to discover her family's past and how much she's like Lucy.
Her ability to speak up for herself, that she used the power of her pen and paper, which is so much like me. It always gets me. It's hard to read. Now, my mother couldn't read the book. Mama couldn't read it. She just could not read that. She, like I said, she touched it and she cried, but she could not open it up and read the letters.
The letters offer a rare first-hand account of slavery by those who were enslaved in their own words.
These were real people writing in real time, not reminiscing, etc., but writing in real time. And you got a real sense then of their needs, at least their needs in terms of their relationship with John Hartwell Cocke.
Cocke and his slaves corresponded for more than 20 years. Their letters are now in the archives at the University of Virginia. The Cocke papers fill more than 200 boxes donated by his descendants in 1939. Cocke, along with Thomas Jefferson, founded the university. And before sending Peyton Skipwith to Liberia, Cocke loaned Peyton to the school to lay bricks.
He quarried stone right there at the University of Virginia's campus to build some of the original buildings.
In 2013, the University of Virginia formed a commission on slavery to examine the contributions of those who were enslaved. Since then, a residence hall was named after two married slaves, William and Isabella Gibbons. And the once unmarked slave grave sites on campus are now recognized with a memorial. And when the school built a new office building, historian Garth Anderson went searching for an enslaved person who worked at the quarry to name the building after. And the university bestowed that honor on Peyton Skipwith. Anderson spoke to us from the newly named Skipwith Hall.
So I just searched on stone and eventually came up that there was a slave named Peyton who signed his mark, an X, on a receipt for $25 for cutting stone for the anatomical hall in 1827, and realized that not only was he someone that toiled here, that he was really a historic figure based on the fact that he had written letters that have beautiful penmanship, but in public he had to use his mark.
In order to keep his secret. But those days are long gone. Peyton's hard work now recognized. Carol, whose parents moved to Cleveland in 1941, says Skipwith Hall brings her family's history full circle.
I always say this isn't just my history. This is our history. This is American history. I will now bring my letter to a close, hoping soon to hear from you again. I am, as ever, your servant, Lucy Skipwith.
Next week on Ideas Sunday, we learn the history of a woman who few knew much about, though a prominent Cleveland institution bears her name. Eliza Bryant moved here as a child, having just left the South after being freed from slavery.
I think coming up here as a person that was black, regardless of the status of free or slave, is really something that she struggled with, but really having an entrepreneurial spirit and being very ambitious. The stories that have been traveled down, I guess, through generations to us is that she went door knocking and really didn't take no for an answer, and took that same tenacity of what I'm sure it takes to travel from what you know as a home in North Carolina to relocate to somewhere like Cleveland and decide to take on an endeavor like this.
Though she died 112 years ago, she created a place here that stands as her legacy today and helps more people in Cleveland than ever before. Eliza Bryant's story next week on Ideas Sunday. Ohio's college graduates carry some of the heaviest student loan debt burden in the country. The Ohio Attorney General's office says nearly 70% of them leave college or other secondary education owing money, an average of about $30,000 per graduate. And nearly 1 of every 7 Ohio grads defaults on those loans. Personal finance experts say high debt levels make it difficult to buy a house because saving for a down payment is more difficult when a large chunk of your income goes to paying off student debt. Worse still, that high debt-to-income ratio can bring down credit scores, making securing any home loan more difficult or more expensive. So how to decrease student debt and help more people achieve home ownership? IdeaStream associate producer Lisa Ryan reports on one Cleveland suburb's attempt to resolve both issues with a program that could also benefit that town.
The small village of Newburgh Heights covers less than 1 square mile. It lies adjacent to the Slavic Village neighborhood, the so-called epicenter of the nation's foreclosure crisis. Harvard Avenue, the town's main drag, is mostly industrial. Interstate 77 runs right through town, and the highway gives Newburgh Heights its main draw, proximity to other places. A 10-minute drive gets you to downtown Cleveland or the trendier Tremont neighborhood. The city is home to just over 2,000 residents, and it's seen its population and home values decline through the years. So, Mayor Trevor Elkins wanted to bring attention and new residents to the city.
I've tried to, in my time here as mayor, use my local home rule power to address kind of more global issues that are national issues in a way that impacts us locally.
So Mayor Elkins created the Student Loan Assistance Program, which he considers a win all around. Graduates receive help paying back their loans, and he creates buzz about his city. The program will provide student loan assistance for people buying homes in Newburgh Heights. To be eligible, you have to buy the home within 5 years of graduating and live there 10 to 15 years. If you do, the city will pay 50% of your college loans, up to $50,000. But you have to live there 15 years to get the full amount. So, if you have a $20,000 loan after graduating, you get half of that, or $10,000. If you live there 10 years, you get 80% of that amount. In this example, that would be $8,000. And if you leave before 10 years, you don't get anything.
Our view, and I think the view of somebody buying a home is, you know what, I didn't lose anything either. I got a nice home. I had a potential for a return on the end. Circumstances have changed, and that's all fine. I had a nice home while I lived here. It's a great community, tight-knit, close, walkable, golf course, public transit. You can see downtown. So there's all the amenities that you could possibly want. So you would have those for the short time that you lived here.
After 10 to 15 years, many people might have already paid off their loans, but the city will still rebate the full amount. Elkins says the city will pay for the program through a combination of property taxes and income taxes, which he hopes go up as a result of the new residents. For city officials, the ideal situation is increased demand for homes in Newburgh Heights will drive up property values, which in turn brings in more money for the city. According to the U.S. Census, there are just over 1,000 housing units in Newburgh Heights, and about 150 of those are vacant. The median home value of owner-occupied homes is $65,400. On the housing website Zillow, there are 5 houses for sale in Newburgh Heights listed over $50,000, which is one of the requirements to be eligible for the program. That number's gone up since the new year. The U.S. Census says there aren't any owner-occupied homes valued at more than $200,000, although that could soon change. There are 3 more homes currently being built on vacant lots, and they're listed at $250,000. Mayor Elkins says the city hopes to build about 20 to 25 houses in the next few years. Realtors with homes listed in Newburgh Heights say they've seen more interest than usual in their homes, but it's hard to say whether that's due to the program.
My response for this home has been phenomenal. I've had buyers calling me. I've had people emailing me, even from other states, inquiring about the home. So it's just been great.
A realtor selling the 3 new construction homes says he's also received calls from out-of-state buyers. One person said he was from Memphis, Tennessee, and was considering either a home in Newburgh Heights or a home in a different state that offered a similar incentive. Daniel Shoag, an economics professor at Case Western Reserve University, studies cities that offer incentive programs. He says it will be interesting to see the impact this program might have, both positive and negative. If it works and property values go up, longtime residents might be upset to see their taxes go up with it.
Other issues may involve equity concerns. You're offering 2 households in the same area different benefits based on educational choices that may reflect all kinds of things that don't seem fair to some of the residents. And so, that too can be a concern.
He says normally he studies cities that give incentives to businesses, which makes this program unique.
We looked at so often these economic incentives are provided to businesses. They're not typically provided directly to the public. And what I watched happen time and time again, it was very, very frustrating, is you would see how governments would give money to private businesses for job creation or to move to their community. And there was all these promises of, well, it's going to generate this much revenue, it's going to generate this many jobs. And then it just felt like it never delivered The businesses never delivered, or they only delivered part of what they promised, and then they would move within 4 or 5 years to the next highest bidder.
Erin Figuera is ready to make a commitment to Newburgh Heights. The village wasn't on her radar at all until she saw news articles about the Student Loan Assistance Program.
It interests me because unfortunately I'm 33 and I still have student loans that date back to when I received my undergraduate degree. I actually graduated with my undergrad in 2007. So I'm working on paying it off. I'd like to have a home.
Figuera estimates that at the rate she's paying off her loan, she could have another 10 years of paying it off. Denise Franklin, who's worked in real estate since 2007, has seen the impact student loan debt can have on potential home buyers.
It's a very big problem because we have our students going to college. We always say, go to college, get your education, and they do, and they come out and they want to buy a home. But guess what? That debt is against you, and that pulls a lot of people down, and that stops a lot of students from getting homes.
Figuera's undergraduate loans aren't eligible for the program since she graduated more than 5 years ago. But she remains interested in homes in Newburgh Heights due to the city's location and affordability.
I'm interested in the Newburgh Heights area because it's very up and coming. Everybody I speak to is just like, the Slavic Village area, Newburgh Heights, it's almost like the next Lakewood. It's just really going to take off.
Potential homebuyers considering Newburgh Heights, even if they're not eligible, could make this program a success. Despite no official marketing campaign, the village has received national attention, which could be exactly the boost it needs to grow its population and expand its tax base.
Move to Newburgh. It's going to be the next community that I really believe people are going to see as a place to have a family and kind of put your roots down and grow up in.
I don't think it would have mattered who was on the ballot.
They've done the research.
We're trying to get the truth so the public knows what's happening.
Ohio lawmakers want to better protect victims of domestic violence. Representative Jadine Boyd says domestic violence tends to be repeated, often with an escalation of harm. To break that cycle, Boyd is proposing Aisha's Law, the legislation named after Shaker Heights teacher Aisha Frazier. Frazier's ex-husband, former Judge Lance Mason, is accused of stabbing her to death. Mason previously served 9 months in prison for an attack on Frazier so severe she required facial reconstructive surgery. We talked about the legislation and its chances of becoming law Friday on 90.3 WCPN during the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable.
Well, I think they want to really put some focus on domestic violence and the situation that happened with Aisha Frazier Mason. And she was allegedly killed by her ex-husband, who is a former judge, former state lawmaker. Really speaks to that whole idea of it can happen to anybody. It is not confined to any particular group of people or income level or anything like that. And so there's this talk about having this graduated approach where basically to try to identify who could possibly be in a domestic violence situation and how to intervene before you have the call where the victim is dead.
Yeah, the family of Aisha, this was almost immediately they came through and said, we've got to make Aisha's Law and put this 11 questionnaire into effect. And if the answer to the questions are yes too many times, you're a threat and you should be kept in jail. And if that had applied to Lance Mason, the answers would have been enough.
Right, they're saying even 4 yeses is enough to look at some kind of detaining.
And I think it was 6, right? Yeah. And so right off the bat they came out and they said, this has got to happen. We've had too many women get killed by their exes, even though the signs are all there. Let's get this into law. Let's make this into practice. And that would be a very nice way to honor her.
And this is, I think the whole issue of domestic violence has been evolving, at least at the legislative level, in terms of people looking at it. I mean, there was a bill that was passed last year and signed that had been proposed and didn't get passed, but last year got signed. It was sponsored by Amelia Sykes of Akron, who's now the minority leader, about dating violence and civil protection orders for people who are in dating violence situations. Then right after, Mike DeWine's only been in office for a little under a month, he signed an executive order extending some protections for people in dating situations for domestic violence. So, I think that there's a growing understanding that domestic violence is a problem that it comes along gradually, but it's a serious problem that needs to be paid attention to before we get to this crisis point where somebody is seriously in danger.
Janine Boyd of Cleveland Heights had sponsored this bill. She told Cleveland.com it's a reminder people never know what's going on behind closed doors, as you said, but she has a target date for the governor to get this thing signed. What and why?
Well, I think, the idea of putting it out there and getting it done quickly to honor Aisha's memory, as well as to just get this out in public discussion, that domestic violence, again, is a pattern. It's something that happens over time. It's not, there are signs, there are clear signs that can be followed, and if intervention can happen, then people's lives can be saved. And I think that's, the Democrats are also in an interesting situation right now where they helped put Speaker Larry Householder in the Speaker's position, and I think that they're hoping that maybe that they can use some of that to try to get this bill that arguably should be passed, getting it done.
Well, if you think about it, up till now, the only remedy is a restraining order. But somebody bent on hurting someone doesn't care if they get arrested or bad things happen. And so there's really been no protection for women like Aisha who are under this threat.
And a civil protection order is a step above a restraining order, but still, you're right. I mean, when there is escalating violence and people can see it, or it can be identified in some way through an 11-question situation or whatever, then maybe something can happen to prevent the ultimate, which nobody wants to see happen.
There's much more Ohio politics and news to come. Immediately after this program, stay with WVIZ for The State of Ohio with Karen Kassler. This week, she spoke with the Buckeye Institute's Greg Lawson and Terry Thomas from the Center for Community Solutions about some of the challenges Governor Mike DeWine faces with his first budget, including Medicaid spending.
DeWine has done something very interesting. I think, was it yesterday or the day before, rebidding the managed care contracts. There's a lot of controversy about how the managed care plans, especially relative to the expansion population and relative to pharmacy and cost of prescription drugs, has happened. And I think that there is going to be a very intense focus both from the administration and a number of legislators. I think the Speaker has spoken about that, some concerns. I think you're going to see the Joint Medicaid Oversight Committee look at that. I know some of the legislators that are on there are very interested in looking at that kind of with hawk eyes. Because you had that cost about did the spread on the PBMs, pharmacy benefit manager, was $200 million. I think we have to be careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when we do these kind of reforms either. But I think that there's going to be a lot of looking at that. And that could be, that could literally be hundreds of millions of dollars that's sloshing around in the system that we start finding out some stuff.
You're watching Ideas Sunday. Thanks for spending part of your morning with us. Still to come, is it movie magic or scientific fact? Cleveland's Natural History Museum takes us on an entertaining journey behind the silver screen. But first up, in the Detroit Shoreway neighborhood in Cleveland's west side, construction continues on a new home for the LGBTQ Community Center of Greater Cleveland. Its completion will inaugurate an era of permanency for the center, which over the past 44 years has moved all over Cleveland. Will this hub finally give Cleveland the gayborhood it lacks? And does the city need one? 90.3 WCPN Morning Edition host Amy Eddings dug into this issue for the latest episode of IdeaStream's podcast, The Downtowner. So we ask Amy, her Downtowner co-host George Hahn, and Ken Schneck, a professor at Baldwin Wallace and author of the book LGBTQ Cleveland, to consider where are the gays?
From the IdeaStream studios in Cleveland, Ohio, it's The Downtowner.
Cleveland doesn't have a gayborhood the way New York City has one in Chelsea or the West Village, or San Francisco has one in the Castro. There used to be gay baths and gay bars in downtown Cleveland, but they're gone. George, do you remember that scene?
A lot of it was before my time. I mean, I came of age, I came out in the early 90s, 1991 to be exact, I think. And when I was coming home from college for summers and Christmas holidays, there were still bars downtown, a couple, like Numbers on Frankfurt Street Nine of Clubs on West 9th. Wasn't technically a gay bar, but it was, or club, but it was extremely gay friendly. And there was another place in the Flats called Aqualon, which was next to the Flatiron.
Now, I used to go with my friends, my gay friends. When I was in high school, I would sneak in with a fake ID. There was Trax, which was right around the corner from where you and I live in the Warehouse
I
District.
think it became Nine of Clubs. I think it's the same address.
And there was one on East 14th Street called Et Ceteras. And I loved going there because they had the best music.
Sure.
But yeah, it's all gone. And that's kind of surprising to me that the heart of Cleveland wouldn't have a really strong gay presence. A gayborhood, to me, just to define our terms here, is more than just a collection of bars. It's bookstores, it's gay and lesbian themed cards and gift shops. It's a place where gays and lesbians have a sense of ownership, like they own the neighborhood. They feel safe to walk hand in hand down the street. But there's also typically in these kind of gayborhoods a community center. I know that was true in New York's West Village with the LGBT Center on West 13th Street that opened in 1984. Now, Ken, I know that Cleveland's community center has had a harder time getting a toehold in any one community. Can you tell me about that history?
Yeah, it's really moved around quite a bit in its history. Back in the mid-'70s, they had a soft launch over on Coventry Road, and they were all set to open. And some people visited, and they were going to have the big grand opening, and then a mysterious fire burned it to the ground. And
no one's ever figured out.
We've never
what
figured
happened?
out as a community what happened there. So then the LGBT Center moved briefly downtown. It was downtown by some of the gay clubs down there. It was zoned to then go to Tremont, but then Tremont, some of the executives there in Tremont said, this is not what we want here. And so it finally landed over in what we now call Hingetown, but in Ohio City. In those intervening years, there was this red phone that we've talked about, this red phone that followed people around, that even when there wasn't an LGBT center, there was a red phone that people could call. It went from apartment to apartment. So people could say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, can I get some advice? But it really wasn't until the late 80s that the LGBT center had more of a foothold, and that was in what we now call Hingetown.
And I know that where it is now in Detroit Shoreway, the director of the center, Phyllis Harris, is really hoping that it acts as an anchor institution and starts to collect gay and lesbian-oriented establishments there. But I'm wondering if we even need a gayborhood, right? Bars have historically been the cultural center for the LGBT community, but that has really changed. Many are closing due to the popularity of hookup apps like Grindr, and ironically, rising tolerance. Every bar's a gay bar. You just have to show up with your boyfriend or girlfriend and have a drink. George, do you think gay bars are still important?
Yes and no. And with the rising tolerance, the idea of rising tolerance and every bar is a gay bar is, I'm not fully on board with that idea. The LGBTQ community is among the biggest targets of hate crimes. So this accepting society, yes and no. Gay bars, I'm not a drinker, I've been sober a long time, but I do think culturally as harbors, as safe places, they are important as sort of markers. Ken and I were talking on the podcast about how it's a place where you can go and speak with and hang out with and be with other people who have been shunned from their families. We're not allowed to donate blood. Some people still,
because of AIDS, HIV/AIDS.
Right. It's for some people coming from a gay background, being gay in our society, for a lot of people, it's still rough. And so sometimes you want to be around people who've shared those experiences.
Ken, you lived in New York City and Vermont before you moved to Cleveland, and you told us in the podcast that you feel more acutely the need for a gay bar or hangout in Cleveland. Why?
I do. I mean, I went from the gay mecca of New York City to the gay mecca of Vermont, and then as I drove the 8.5 hours here, you really can feel it. It may be just the way my brain works, but I was losing rights as I drove across state lines from Vermont to Ohio. Housing discrimination and employment discrimination and discrimination in public accommodations, all of those protections that I had in Vermont, I don't have here in Ohio. And so do I want to go to a gay bar and gather people together and say, we're so discriminated against, how does it feel? No. But that whole idea of a family of choice has always been really salient with me. It's always been something that was pushed. You know, I certainly, even coming out in New York City, I struggled with my family, but then I had my family of choice, my family of association. And I like knowing that I can find that there's no even question that I'm going to be around that energy. And it's not so much about a gay bar to me, a gay space, a space where I know that there are going to be gay people. Straight people being accepting, that's awesome. I'm all for it.
Thumbs up.
Yes, thanks, straight people. But I also want to be around, yes, I want to be around other gay people.
Yeah.
George, you quip in the podcast that you feel like you're the gay in downtown Cleveland. Explain
It's
that.
not a feeling, it's a fact. It's in books.
What's that sense of isolation about?
I literally, and I said this, it sounds like a joke, and I literally could count on one hand the number of gay people, gay men, I'd met socially moving in the downtown space since I moved downtown in late 2017. It's a very straight environment. And
do you think it's because downtown is the central business district?
that could have something to do with it. I really can only speculate. Also, another speculation, a lot of gay people are in the creative class and in the creative fields. Downtown, residentially and commercially, is not necessarily a creative hub. It's, a lot of real estate, banking, medical, eds and meds, education. Mm-hmm. So there are not a lot of like artists or, gay people in theater, although Playhouse Square is right next door, but still, you don't feel that. I don't get that vibe. So I've never totally, let's just say I haven't locked eyes with someone because I'll put it this way. My gaydar is pretty active, but downtown it's kind of a flat line. Occasionally there's a little blip, but it's like, oh, there's one, and then flat line.
So I'm wondering if there's larger implications here when you mention the creative class for Cleveland. Urban theorist Richard Florida said in this 2002 cult classic, The Rise of the Creative Class, that there's a gay index, that there's a correlation between a gay community and its active presence and economic development, and the ability of a city to attract the artists, makers, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs of today. Does a lack of a gayborhood say Cleveland isn't open to diversity and therefore new ideas? Ken, what do you think?
I think that we have such significant events here has helped. We talked a bit in the podcast about the Gay Games, and I think the Gay Games made a huge difference in 2014 to tell the world, oh my gosh, we can have this international gathering of LGBTQ people here who universally walked away having a wonderful experience and then went back all over the world, truly, and said, wait a second, Cleveland was amazing. We had a great time in Cleveland. The key then is to sustain that. I think the building of the new LGBT Center, so the new LGBT Center is effectively across the street from where the current LGBT Center is, right there on Detroit in Gordon Square where I live.
But it's currently in a basement.
It's in a basement, and it's not only moving
Get used to it.
Yeah, it's not only moving into the light, into an expansive building, but one of the key pieces is it's the first time in the center's history that they will own their own building. And that's a really big deal. That is an established presence. So I think that foothold in Gordon Square in Detroit Shoreway will make a huge difference. And there's a lot of open storefronts, and we've been pushing really hard to get more LGBTQ-owned businesses there in the Detroit Shoreway area. And the Detroit Shoreway Community Development Corporation is all about it. So
You've also seen responses to our podcast, though, on social media, where people have mentioned the lack of a gayborhood says that Cleveland's diverse and welcoming. We're integrated into the population. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
I actually got into it with someone in the comment section, and then we met out for a drink the other day just to have a conversation in person.
At a gay bar?
No, it was, we met at Banter, but in Detroit Shoreway, so it was kind of that still middle ground. That idea of we've been fighting for so long for acceptance. contrasted with, which is not necessarily what I feel. I think we were fighting so long for equality, but we were never trying to, in my opinion, I'll speak from the I was never trying to lose my LGBTQ identity in the process of getting the same rights as the person who lives next door to me.
100%.
I still want the amazing, rich cultural history that we have that is marked by both highs and lows. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the whole we're looking to assimilate, we're looking to be just the same. That really sacrifices an incredible history which is pockmarked with people who fought like hell to have what we have today.
And died because of it.
Absolutely.
So Ken Schneck, where are the gays?
I think the gays are definitely in our phones, right? So we definitely meet other people on our phones. Gordon Square is a high concentration. It's been interesting to see all the responses to the podcast, people saying, but what about Lakewood? And yes, there's a high concentration of gay people living there, but they're in their houses and they don't take kindly to me just going in to their houses to go say hi. So I think having that concentration, I think we didn't give it a shout out on the podcast, and we should say a lot of these neighborhoods have things like the Dean Rufus House of Fun. It's kind of a classic
in Ohio
feature
City
in Ohio City.
Hingetown,
Yeah. Classic feature of a neighborhood, and many of those. And that certainly was an anchor for all the bathhouses in the LGBT center that was there and the bars over there. And certainly, as Phyllis mentioned, there's a great population in Larchmere. But again, in terms of a neighborhood that you can walk, I always think of like cars can't go down this street. You know, there's a big rainbow arch and it's painted on the sidewalks. We just don't have that.
Boy, where is that? I
And
want to go
that's-
visit there. Yeah.
I want that.
Again, with the city element, and Ken just touched upon this, when everyone's in their car, it's hard to interact. In New York, when there are more people on the street, even in Boston, where I've also lived, there's more of a social interaction at eye level without the barrier of car windows. You know, we literally bump into each other and have a conversation. In a place where you're in a house and you're not stacked and you're not living in a densely populated area, I think it's a little trickier.
The pros and cons of at-home medical screening test, the pursuit of the perfect report card, and a State of the Union recap. Those are just some of the stories and topics we discussed this past week on The Sound of Ideas.
The second layer then is they need to come in to the physician's office and have a traditional pap smear. And what's noted is that of the total group that was studied in the OSU study, only 11% went on to get a pap smear. So therein lies the next gap. So it's terrific that we can get this into the hands of the women. It's terrific that they're participating, but now the next step is that those individuals that are identified with high-risk HPV, we then need to get them in.
It's worthwhile for all of us to step back and say, you know, we as humans, as young people especially, develop at different rates. And, you know, sometimes I'm one of the people that hatched when I was around 20. Like I was, okay, now I'm ready to go with this. And I think recognizing that we don't all hit the same markers at the same rate.
I think a lot of his speech was about reiterating the importance of the border wall, or barrier as he puts it, taking claim, justifiably so, for the things that he's done for those that supported him, the tax cut plan, deregulation, other kinds of things. But these are also the kinds of things where the partisan divide exists. So the rhetoric was very much about unity. I think a lot of the substance really was about the more traditional kinds of positions he has had and will continue to have.
What we're trying to do is look at a systems change. Legislation is part of it, but we also have to look at staffing, we have to look at resources, we have to look at all of these different issues. So even if we did pass legislation, the issue would be, can we actually fund it the way that it needs to be, and making sure that the Building and Housing and Health Department is equipped to carry out the legislation once we put it in.
And tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, to learn what might become of the workers, the suppliers, and the city of Lordstown should GM close its plant there, we can look to the city of Janesville, Wisconsin, which lost its GM plant in 2008. We'll have author Amy Goldstein with us to talk about her book, Janestown, in which she covered the fallout of the plant closing there. Join the conversation.
Have you ever watched a movie and asked yourself, could that really happen? In the genre of science fiction, taking a little artistic license and bending the facts is part of the drama. But a new film series allows you to watch sci-fi movies through the lens of someone who really knows the facts, a scientist at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. IdeaStream producer Mary Fecto explains.
Exterior, desert in New Mexico, day. A New Mexico State Police plane soars across the cloudless sky.
But they don't show New Mexico terrain. It, in fact, was filmed in Southern California, and I knew that terrain. Quiet. There we go. My name is Joe Hannibal, and I am the curator of invertebrate paleontology at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. I love movies. I like old movies. I like movies that have giant bugs in them. And I especially like the movie Them, because it is the mother of all bug movies.
There is no word to describe them.
In the seminal creature feature from 1954, giant mutant ants wreak havoc on an unsuspecting public. Humanity's only hope lies in the bumbling Dr. Medford and his bombshell daughter, both of whom are myrmecologists, ant specialists. It might sound hokey, but the film is crawling with charm, according to Dr. Hannibal.
Number one, the music. It's spectacular music with crescendos of information. I like the noises made by the ants. Okay, they're not too accurate, but they are cool. And it does have a series of very accurate observations in it.
These accurate observations were in the spotlight at the Capitol Theater last week as moviegoers were treated to a special screening of the sci-fi film, along with a post-film chat with Dr. Hannibal.
Yeah. It's called Arthropleura.
It's part of the Real Science film series, a collaboration between the Cleveland Museum of Natural History and Cleveland Cinemas.
Real Science is an attempt to engage the public with our curators who have knowledge about particular kinds of science that ties into movies.
And Dr. Hannibal's past study of giant prehistoric arthropods, a phylum that includes insects like ants, makes him uniquely qualified to uncover the real and not so real science of them.
Well, you might say that the ants are not the most accurately reproduced ants in the movie business. And that in fact, well, they're kind of funny looking ants. But heck, there's such big kernels of truth in the movie, it's amazing. Okay, there are no big ants like that, but there could be big arthropods like that, and there were in the past. There was an animal about 8 feet long. This is a giant arthropod. They made trackways in the sand and mud during the Coal Age, about 300 million years ago, and parts of them are found all over the place. A lot of my study has been about fossil arthropods. And among these arthropods are rather large ones, including supposed giant millipedes and even bigger giant millipedes. And in the movie, they actually replicated what I did in my particular study, and that is based upon a part of an animal, they figured out how big the animal was in its entirety.
Over 12 centimeters. 12!
That would make the entire...
About 2.5 meters in length. Over 8 feet.
So that's plausible. So they really did their research.
Audience members at the Capitol screening were pleasantly surprised that the film received a stamp of approval from a bona fide giant bug expert.
I thought it was pretty cool that the stuff in the movie was fairly accurate, and he was able to confirm that, which I thought was pretty neat.
But of course, there was also a healthy dose of skepticism.
It's kind of hard to relate to giant ants in the desert when you live in Cleveland. So
The Year of the Pig is underway as people all over the world this week celebrated the first day of the Chinese Lunar New Year. At the Asia Food Company in Cleveland's Asiatown, patrons watched the Chinese lion dance, a popular tradition during Lunar New Year celebrations. You may notice people placing red envelopes in the lion's mouth that's supposed to bring good luck. We checked in with a few residents at the Asian Evergreen Apartments, a senior living community on Payne Avenue, for their thoughts on the new year.
对于中国人过新年呢，实际上是一种快乐， 在新年的期间呢，玩各种游戏，另外呢，就是对每个人来说呢，都是对于长辈的尊敬，尽孝道，是这样的。
大家新年快乐，祝大家平安健康。
我们不一定猪年就是特别高兴，就说每一个年我们都高兴。
And we should note the pig is believed to be a symbol of optimism, wealth, and hard work. And speaking of hard work, before we leave you this morning, a big honor for Lakewood High All-American Melvin Blah. We shared Melvin's story with you last week, the Lakewood soccer star who was born in a refugee camp in Africa's Ivory Coast after his family fled conflict in Liberia. At Lakewood, Melvin earned honors for his play on the soccer field, including setting a school record for career assist. And on Wednesday night at the 19th Annual Greater Cleveland Sports Awards, he picked up another accolade, Male High School Athlete of the Year. Congratulations to him and to all the other winners. Well, that's going to do it for us for this morning. Up next, the state of Ohio with Karen Kassler. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Rick Jackson. We'll see you back here Friday night with more great ideas.
Brought to you by Westfield, offering insurance to protect what's yours, grow your business, and achieve your dreams.